Noting that it is August 18th, 2021, and it's 7:04 p.m., I will call the Sherborn Board of Health meeting to order. Since it's a virtual meeting, we'll do roll call votes for any votes we need to take. And we have 3 of the members here tonight: Matt Beavers, Matt Vitale, and Daryl Beardsley. And we also have the Dover Board of Health joining us for a joint discussion. And I'll let them call their meeting to order in just a moment. But first, I want to announce any items to be added as not reasonably anticipated by the chair 48 hours in advance of the meeting. And we can vote whether to amend the agenda. So one thing that has come up is condition of farm pond bacteria counts. So that's the one thing I have to add. Does anyone have anything else to add to our agenda?
Daryl, did we need to add anything with the upcoming ZBA hearings?
Or do we? I don't know. Do you recommend that?
Daryl, if I may, Daryl. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Matt.
Go, Mark.
I just want to say, Ellen sent us at 6:11 this evening ZBA agenda. There is a notice on there for the Dunkin' Donuts, proposed Dunkin' Donuts, and I think we should comment on that.
Yes. Okay. So I just got in from
Perfect.
4 a.m. to now work day. So I haven't read that yet, but happy to go over it later. So let's add that as an option. Anything else?
That's all I got.
Okay. So do we have a motion to add those 2 items to tonight's agenda?
So moved.
Seconded.
All in favor? Daryl, aye.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Matt Vitale, aye.
Okay, and I just want to note, we do have 2 variance hearings tonight. We have what I anticipate will be a robust discussion coming up. So I'd like to be mindful of the people who are here for the variance hearing, and we can, I'd like to hear thoughts of whether we would want to consider carrying over any discussion if we don't get to everything by 7:30 into, after the 7:50 variance hearing.
Yeah, so what I would propose is I think we should try to get done before the 7:30. I think we should have a period of public comment to open. I would encourage people to be brief in your comments and not to reiterate previously raised points. But I think we need to be respectful both of the time of people who are carving time of their evening to be here, and I think we'll want to get to the point of decision, as well as abide by our previously scheduled variance hearings that were already on the docket when we scheduled this.
Okay, and I don't know if people could take a moment who are in the audience, and David Williams, if you would be willing to count, if people could raise their hand on whether they would like to make comment, and then that will give us some idea of maybe how long people could have to speak.
So I think, Daryl, regardless of the number, I think we should focus on 1 to 2 minutes and plan for wrapping it up by 7:20.
Okay, and then, all right, so let's let Dover then open their meeting, and then we can get started.
Okay. This is Gerald Clark, Chair of the Dover Board. I note for purposes of speed here that we have all 3 members, Dr. Stephen Kruskal and Dr. Kay Peterson. I would ask the chair if she would accommodate a request that all present put in the chat their names and their residency. There is a vast number of individuals who are here tonight, and I think for record purposes, it would be beneficial to have that on the record.
Jerry, the chat is not enabled for this meeting.
Okay, well.
So how about before people speak, they need to say their name and, whether they're from Dover or Sherborn.
Okay. Well, that's all I had to say. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So Matt, would you like to, oh, wait, sorry, Dover, did you open?
We did.
Pardon me. Yes, okay. So Matt or someone in Dover, would you like to kick off the discussion?
So I think it's fine to open with public comment, and then we'll discuss. So I see 4 people requesting comment. K-phone will need to self-identify in terms of residents. I would propose we go in alphabetical order, starting with Dan Cahan, Courtney Eck. Don't know who K-phone is. And then
be careful. Focus on your hoverboard.
To see if we're going to go to Lego.
Rochelle, we totally agree with you that hoverboard should be the focus, but please mute. So Dan, go ahead.
All right. Hi, this is Dan Kahn from Dover. Just briefly,
I would like to say it's my hope and opinion that we should be having the kids wear masks in school due to the contagiousness of the Delta variant, as we've all been reading about, including the 2,700 cases reported among fully vaccinated individuals in Massachusetts just in the week ending August 14th. Hopefully they can be vaccinated soon and we can move on from this. That's my brief comment.
Thanks so much, Dan. Courtney, I think you're on deck next.
Hi, Courtney Eck. I'm in Sherborn, Pine Hill parent. I've been following a lot of the discussions and the news, and I think, we have a lot of great professionals who've been on this whole process for the last, year and a half. And I think they've made great decisions. And so far, I feel like we've been in safe hands, as safe as we can be. So I trust whatever their judgment is tonight. I also want to encourage the board to have masking in the schools during the school year, just given everything that's going on. Did you want to say something? Okay, so not to cheat, but I have a second person here who would like to make a comment. Go ahead. So this is James Eck, Pine Hill student. Do you want to say something about masks? Go ahead.
I think masks should be worn inside. I think masks should be worn at Pine Hill.
Mm-hmm. They make you feel safer? You good? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's always
Perfect.
good to hear from a student too.
Thanks, Courtney. I think we have Tracy Mannion up next.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep, coming through loud and clear.
Excellent, thank you so much. I'm Dr. Tracy Mannion of Dover, Massachusetts. And as some of you know, I do research. I put a deck together that I have sent to the Board of Health and the Health and Hygiene Committee in our community. We're in a very different place than we were a year and a half ago. We know more about COVID now, and survival rates are now over 98% in all age groups. We're treating most COVID cases at home, as we do with the flu. As a highly educated community, our residents realize COVID is not going away anytime soon. And like influenza, it will arrive, it will circulate, and it will continue to have variants. And it will most likely be the same way most variants evolve over time. They become more infectious, but generally less virulent, as Delta is evidencing to us. Government data now are showing that more people are actually dying of pneumonia. Yet at least one study shows pneumonia and other potentially dangerous microbes can be contained in our children's masks when worn by children for over 6 to 8 hours at a time. Parents locally are noticing a rise in respiratory illness and headaches in their children, and this is not due to COVID, pneumonia, or influenza. Children have been playing sports with masks outdoors and are being negatively affected in the heat. There's exhaustion, dehydration, and headaches, and parents know this is in relation to mask wearing. School-based transmission to teachers and schoolmates is rare, and this has been reported by JAMA, CDC, the Lancet, Science, and various meta-analysis. Masks are not effective in preventing the general public from catching coronavirus, and this is reported to us by the US Surgeon General, CDC, National Institutes of Public Health, New England Journal of Medicine, and PubMed, just to name a few. WHO and NIH have also commented that masks don't work the way we think they do. They might make us feel better, people, but they don't work that well. Mask side effects, to name just a few, just a handful, is that there's so many: headaches, inflammation of the respiratory tract, oxygen level drop, fatigue. We see an increase in carbon dioxide levels under the mask and CO2 blood content, breathing resistance, contamination with bacteria, funguses, viral and dental infections. The NIH talks about rebreathing the pathogens on the mask, and there are extensive studies on the psychological damage and mental health that our children are undergoing because of these masks. And that all comes from ResearchGate, PubMed, Springer, WHO, and NIH. A medical doctor states, quote, "We can't eliminate the virus completely, at least not in any reasonable time frame. Smallpox took about 100 years. The next phase of this pandemic is going to be learning to live more normally with some risk of COVID-19. We do this every day with other risks, but it's going to be hard to make this mental shift." The WHO 2020 guidance on children and masks states, and this is the overarching guiding principles.
Tracy, I just want to acknowledge you have multiple other comments in your overtime.
Yes, yeah, okay. I'm just about done. 2 more comments. Who says do no harm, do what's in the best interest of the children. Numerous schools near us that are actually larger than us are not mandating masks. They are making them optional. This includes Millis, Medfield, Norwood, and Carlisle. And masks should be deemed optional, I feel, for 20 to 21. And this is based on science and parental knowledge of the children's personal, physical, and mental health. And
Tracy, we need to have time for other folks.
Yep,
perfect.
Thank
Kate,
you.
when you're up. Okay, we've got no K phone. We'll go to Carolyn in Dover.
Hi, Carolyn Malloy, Dover, Massachusetts, and I've got Molly, who's going to be a freshman in the school system. And I would like you guys to touch upon your thoughts about masking the kids during sports. And I know that there's some doctors on the board here, so I really want to hear the science behind the reasons for masking. I realize that there's a lot of fear and, you know, people feel like a mask might be a safety blanket, sort of a comfort level. But what I really want to hear this evening is the science behind any reasoning. So thank you very much. Look forward to the discussion.
Thanks, Carolyn. We've got 3 comments. We'll take those 3 and then we'll go to the deliberation of the board. I'm going to go Adam Henry.
Hello. Hi.
Yep.
My name is Jen Lemnios. I'm Adam's wife. He's over there. I'm at 49 Oldfield Drive in Sherborn. And I just wanted to say that I'm very much in favor of a mask mandate in the schools. And in fact, I would be in favor of a vaccine mandate for those who are eligible for the vaccine. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you very much. We are, just to be clear, we'll just be discussing masks tonight. I see Brendan O'Hagan.
I'm a teacher at the high school. Is it okay if I still go if I'm not a town resident?
That's fine.
Okay, so I just wanted to point out that the governor has explicitly said multiple times, including today on WGBH with Jim and Marjorie, that while he's not mandating masks for schools across the state, it's his strong recommendation that schools adopt a mask mandate and that he's looking to local officials across the state, hopefully, to adopt that. So that's one component. And the other is, I think we need to be careful about some of the myths around masking. For example, one of the previous speakers mentioned a buildup of carbon dioxide in the mask that was from a study in Germany that was retracted. And JAMA published about that and said that was totally bunk. So the Mayo Clinic has a site listing a bunch of these myths that have either been from retracted studies or that have been debunked in any of the major medical journals. So that's it. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Brendan. Vishay, I think you're going to be our last commenter.
Hi, I'm Vish. I live in Green Lane, Sherborn. 2 kids going to Pine Hill. My son was going to Pine Hill last year. He was wearing masks. My one comment is this is a different variant, more contagious, more transmissible. The kids below 12 don't have vaccines, so you know, they are vulnerable to this variant. In the case of things like flu, we get the flu shots for the kids. We ourselves, adults, get flu shots, and so there's some level of protection. The kids don't. And since the vaccine's breaking through the the vaccinated individuals are equally transmitting it, that implies that the kids don't have any protection because of us being vaccinated. So I think masks should be worn. One other thing I would suggest is nothing is a blanket thing. We should always periodically reevaluate this, just as what was done by all of you last year. And when it's deemed fit, relax the mask mandate. Second thing is, final comment, whenever there's a big holiday break, I would suggest that if we relax the masking rules going into it, reinstate it for 2 to 3 weeks after coming out of that break. So if it's a Thanksgiving holiday and a Christmas, New Year's holiday, whatever, coming out of that holiday break, reinstate the masks for at least two to 3 weeks, and then again ease it off. I think what was done last year was beautiful and perfect. It kept us all safe. Let's go the same way until the kids get the vaccines. That's all. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Vishay. And again, in the interest of having the board have time to deliberate, we're going to close the period of public comment at this point.
I'd like to mention that I think Kay had, or Dover had received some comments by email.
I've got that list. Again, I think in the
okay.
interest of time, we received comments from Robert Andrews of Dover, Dr. Mimi Wackendorf-Dinho from Dover, Kathy Horrigan from Sherborn, Carrie Lombard from Dover, Aaron Rodat-Salva from Dover, Lori Johnson of Dover, Valerie and Samuel Lynn of Dover. So there have been a variety of comments that have been received and communicated. So what I'd like to do is appreciate the public comment. And I think I am confident that in this group of 100+ people, we have a variety of opinions. I think that one of the things we have in common is a shared desire to see our kids successfully in school in a safe environment that's able to prioritize in-classroom participation, to prioritize our school community in a way that's safe and sustainable, both for the students, the families, and the staff that work there. And I think that's truly a common goal. I think there are different interpretations of some data, and appreciate the materials that were sent. Much of the data that was submitted was either factually incorrect or misinterpreted. So just as one example, for Tracy's point, the information she sent in the slide deck cited the CDC flu view, but in fact, the predominant condition is COVID. The data she was referencing is combined mortality, listing COVID and pneumonia. COVID and pneumonia would be co-listed and would count in each heading. So if you break that out, COVID is actually the predominant cause of death in there. So that's, I think, an illustrative example. I think the other thing that is common in the materials that were submitted was that they don't reflect either the Delta variant or the experiences of the last school year or the different cycles of reopening at different points nationally. So the Surgeon General guidance that was submitted was from February of 2020, when we didn't have masks and there were other public health considerations. There were other articles that were cited that were misrepresented, including articles from my own institution, where they cited a sentence out of the first paragraph but ignored the entire point of the article. So again, I think there are lots of citations. I think in terms of the kind of facts that Carolyn asked about, I think what we're really trying to think about here is how do we make schools safe and successful? And it's both. I would say I'm concerned about anybody who's cavalier about a highly virulent infection with a 2% fatality rate, because that is a big deal. But I would also say, I think our principal reason for being concerned about this isn't that we expect that there's a high probability that our children will die from infections we expose them to in school, but rather to say that as a large unvaccinated population with a highly virulent variant, that is certainly an area of risk, and that risk is likely different than what we looked at last year. So I think for us, our challenge tonight is to really think, how can we safely get as much normal for our kids in schools and sports and extracurriculars and other things? And what do those trade-offs look like? And I think that's kind of the principal question. I think that I think Visha's point that we need to continue to reevaluate that, I think would be widely endorsed by members of both boards as well as our community at large. But I think ultimately we need to figure out what does V1 of the current school year look like? How do we do our best to set that up to be safe and successful? How do we incorporate the information about Delta? In terms of what we know about Delta, we know that it's about twice as transmissible as the previous variants that were dominant when we were managing last school year. In terms of transmission in children, we know that they're continue to be represented and well represented in the data. Some of that's skewed because they're the ones who haven't been vaccinated, and we know that Delta is particularly impactful in those communities. In terms of other strategies and mitigation measures that remain in place, testing, managing ventilation, managing other risks, keeping our kids home if they're sick remain important, but are probably appropriate to talk about in other venues. So I first want to sort of invite other comments from members of the Dover Sherborn board. Again, for community comment, we're not taking more community comment at this time. So you're totally welcome to keep your hands up or take them down, but either way, we're going to continue with deliberation of the board.
Thanks, Matt. I think that was a really good summary. Also, thanks to everyone for the community comment and those that sent in a lot of materials. I'll sort of second Matt's comments on, I think we had a number of sources sent in from several people, and I appreciate that they did that. And I spent quite a bit of time going through it, and would second the comment that I think a lot of the evidence cited in opposition to masks, I felt was again, conclusions were drawn from data that was not sort of the data didn't support, or it was older studies, or it wasn't related to COVID. And so I think, for me at least, it was very informative to review that. But I don't think ultimately any of it supported the idea that masks are detrimental. or that they're not helpful. I think as we move into the school year, as Matt said, a big goal is to get back to normal. And I think a lot of things are moving in that way. We're hoping that classrooms are going to look more like they usually would in the past. And so with that, we're sort of, I think, stepping back a lot of the layers that we put in place last year. And I think a lot of them could be safely stepped back. But I think when it comes to masks, I think the big thing for me is just that a large population of our community is not eligible for vaccine yet. And given that, and given the transmissibility, particularly of the newer Delta variant, that I think we can't yet peel away masks. And I think that it's important for our school community because it is one of the largest congregate settings we have in our two communities, that we put in place whatever protections we can, but that we continually reevaluate. And I think as vaccines become available to the younger students, I think we need to revisit this, just like we did last year with everything. And we just keep revisiting as we get more information.
And in the interest of time, I'll just say that Matt and Matt have covered every point I considered making. So I am in agreement with their statements.
Stephen K., what are your thoughts?
I would just like to make the point to clarify something that was said earlier in the meeting in one of the comments, and that is that the Delta variant, well, let me back up and say that vaccination substantially reduces the risk that someone will become infected with the Delta variant. But if they do become infected with it, they're as likely to be contagious as someone who is unvaccinated. And that's a very important reason for masking, even vaccinated people. I also want to emphasize that what we see happening in the South, where schools are already opened, is that the schools that are not requiring masks are finding, some of them anyway, are finding that they have so many cases that they are closing classrooms, closing schools, and going remote for periods of days or weeks, depending on the situation. What we don't have data about are how frequently that's happening, but I think that will become clear with time. I'm very much in support of a mask mandate universally in the schools.
Steve, anything else from you?
No, what's been said, I fully agree with both Matt's and Kay, and I am fully in support of a mask mandate.
Okay. Matt, I had emailed you some draft language. I'm hoping we can kind of share a screen and then edit together. One other comment I would make that I think is important is when we talk about masking, we're talking about having two potential benefits. One is source control to reduce the risk that a child who's infected is able to transmit it to others. And part of it is to provide some protection for the individual who's masked. I think this is part of why the idea of an individual parent being able to determine whether or not it's okay for their kid to expose a classmate on the source control side becomes much more problematic and not about individual choice. I think the other part that's really important is that there are a number of quarantine and close contact guidelines that explicitly depend on being masked. So our single best strategy to minimize the number of children who, if a case is in the classroom, both become infected with COVID, which is our most important goal, but also who have disruption in their classroom learning because they're needing to be treated as close contacts, is also mitigated. I think that's less true for early elementary, where kids will tend to intermingle more, and the benefit of that is smaller, but especially for late elementary, middle school, and high school, there's substantial differences there. So what Matt has up is draft language I provided. This is very much draft language and sort of reflects my own thinking, but would invite the board to take a look at it to see if this lines up with what we think is prudent and the guidance that we should provide to the district. So just walking through it, what we see is at the local, state, and regional level, there's an ongoing rise of cases in COVID that appears to be driven in part by transmissibility of the currently predominant Delta variant in conjunction with variable patterns of vaccine access and uptake. COVID infection in children is often self-limited, but may rarely be associated with severe disease. And I think any parent who's had their kid admitted to the hospital will say, I'm really glad he didn't die, but it wasn't nothing. COVID infection can be associated with severe disease or long-term complications. These infections may also be a source of secondary transmission at both the household and community level. Classroom transmission, which is more likely in the absence of masking, may reasonably be expected to substantially disrupt classroom function. Currently, vaccine access remains unavailable to a large segment of our current school community. As a result of these factors, we would recommend we would require universal masking with either a cloth or surgical mask indoors on school property, regardless of individual vaccination status. We would continue to have in place the process through the local school health leader in terms of accommodations for children with either medical or developmental constraints as were in place last year. Masking on school buses is required regardless of vaccination status. While I support this, this derives from the state and federal regulations. Masks are not required during lunch, snacks, or most outdoor activities. We recommend masking outdoors in crowded settings. We anticipate that sports and extracurricular activities can proceed in a fashion consistent with DESI, DPH, MIA guidance once those guidelines have been published. For the current fall sports in Sherborn, just in terms by way of background, we would then expect most of those to be unmasked unless we get different guidance from MIAA, which has not yet released its guidance. These recommendations will be regularly reassessed based on factors including but not limited to vaccination access for children under age 12, observations regarding patterns of transmission and spread within the Commonwealth, as well as expert guidance from the CDC, DPH, DESI, AAP, et cetera. And so while I recognize that there are a variety of views that were shared by members of the audience, I think fundamentally we all share a goal of having our kids be safe in school and as kind of normal and healthy as we can make it. My hope is that this captures that, but want to get feedback from the board, particularly for the bulleted points. Any edits, modifications, additions, or removals?
I think this looks good. I think if I can just myself summarize sort of the key points, which are that we would require universal masking by everyone indoors at school. Masks will not be required outdoors. Obviously, masks can come off to eat. Sports guidance will be from sports, but we anticipate there won't be masking. That there will be opportunities for individuals to evaluate not having a mask if necessary, if dictated by medical needs. And then finally, we'll look back over. Does that sort of summarize everything pretty well? So required masks inside, not outside, with a pathway for medical or developmental exceptions.
I also think that you've codified something that we've been doing all along, which is recognizing that new information is coming out all the time. And we have talked about COVID-19 at every one of our meetings, all of our special meetings, all meetings with select board, that kind of thing. And so you capture that in the last bullet point, that we will continue to do that.
I'd like to clarify one minor thing about sports, and that is that during the fall, there will not be any indoor sports at DS. If there were indoor sports, we would very likely be mandating masking during those.
So it sounds like people are generally comfortable with the verbiage. Do we want to vote on this as the guidance and requirements will provide to the district?
Okay, so do we have a motion for the Sherborn Board of Health to adopt this language?
So moved. Seconded.
And then roll call vote. Daryl, aye.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Matt Vitale, aye.
Okay, so Dover, if you'd like to vote.
There is a motion then for the Dover Board to accept this proposed guidelines, subject, of course, to changes as they may be necessary over time due to changes in the nature of the disease and its spread.
Second.
I'll do a roll call. Gerald Clark, yay.
Stephen Kresko, yes.
Kay Peterson, yes.
Perfect. So I would thank the 126 attendees who I think are probably largely here for this and not for the Sherborn denied beaver trapping permit. And appreciate you making time tonight. This is not the only time this will be discussed. So this will be discussed at joint school committee in terms of other pieces. There are multiple other avenues that will come out from the district in terms of the lots of appropriate, thoughtful questions that continue to come up. And again, I think that my biggest take home from all of COVID is the importance of humility and being ready to think flexibly. So appreciate everybody here and the time they took from their night to help do their best to make the community what they hope it can be.
Going forward, Matthew? On the other items, I wish you well on both the beaver. That has always been a problematic area in our meetings, particularly since we all love beavers, and I wish you well in dealing with Dunkin' Donuts. It only took us 2 years.
Fair enough. Dover, do you want to close out your meeting?
Motion to adjourn for Dover.
Second.
Passes unanimously. Good night, everybody. Have
Have a
fun
good
with-
night, guys. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay, noting that it's 7:30, we have a variance hearing for a septic replacement at 72 Goulding Street. And the engineer is here. I have word that all of the green cards have been received, so we can proceed. And Dan, are you here? I haven't had a chance to.
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, so you can discuss the reasons for the variance requested.
Yes, this is a septic replacement for a home that was built in the 1950s. It's a 3-bedroom house. It's remaining a 3-bedroom house. There's a number of constraints on this lot that limit where we can put the septic system. The largest one is the well locations. The well is centrally located in the lot and takes up the 100-foot well radius, takes up quite a bit of the lot area. But we did find a small space where we could meet a 100-foot offset to the well, as well as a 100-foot offset to the abutter's well. There's also some wetlands and floodplain toward the rear of the lot. And we did look at testing where the existing system is right in front of the house with a thought to relocate the well. But when we dug over there, it was completely saturated. Even though it's only a couple of feet lower than where we tested, the groundwater was extremely high right there. So we think that this location is really the best location for the septic system, in that we can maintain, a groundwater offset, or a decent groundwater offset, and the Title V requirements for well offsets to the 2 wells. We do need a number of variances to the Sherborn regulations and a couple of local upgrade waivers to make this work. We are proposing an alternative system, the Elgin system, which is approved by the state for a groundwater reduction of 2 feet because of its improved effluent coming out of these systems. So with that, I can go over the specific variances.
Or we could, first, let's see if anyone has questions on the board, and then the agent might comment. And I don't know if we have any abutters to the property here this evening. But if we don't ask the questions you want asked, and you'd like to do that after we go through it, that'd be great. Okay. Again, the classic constrained site, especially in terms of setbacks and soil conditions, groundwater levels, protecting wells. So it looks reasonable for me. Mark, do you have any particular comments about just the overall conditions
Sure, Darrell, if I can give a little bit of an update. Dan gave a great overview of the property itself, and it's unique in its own way because somehow, some way, the well got built into the house. So the question would come to mind, if the well on the property was ever moved out of the house into another area, it may allow for better distances, but it's obviously not the request of the applicant at this point. But I did want to point that out.
That is a unique feature.
Yeah, it appears that the well was outside the house at one point, and then they put an addition on and built it over the well.
Oh, okay.
And the homeowner did have the well recently tested, and it came back with very good water quality.
And it's well protected from rain.
It is.
And I just want to make sure you're not taking it personally, the fact that you cleared the house and you lost like 100 attendees. I mean, that's got to be the biggest. We want to make sure you don't take it personally, because this seems like a tough lot already. Daryl, for me, no additional questions or concerns for me.
And nothing for me. It looks like a tough site, and I think it's a reasonable solution.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and are there any abutters who would like to ask any questions or raise any issues now? Okay, then maybe we can move on to the variance letter and go through those one by one.
Do you want Daryl, or do you want Matt to share the screenshot?
Oh yeah, that'd be great. Yep.
I'm working on it. I'm not as fast as Daryl.
Okay. I've had a bunch of practice though. You could become as good if you'd like to continue practicing. You let me know.
Yeah, I'm good.
Right.
Thanks.
Okay. And again, if anyone thinks of anything else you want to ask as we go through, there's more opportunity. But do we have a motion to grant a variance to section 7.0A?
So moved.
Seconded.
Let's see. Yes, we've discussed those points well off. That's great. Okay, so Daryl, aye.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Matt Vitale, aye.
All right. And do we have a motion to grant a variance to section 8.01?
So moved.
So moved.
Seconded.
Okay, and as noted, there's an groundwater offset reduction permissible under the IA technology program that Mass DEP has. So Daryl, aye.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Matt Vitale, aye.
Do we have a motion to grant a variance to 8.02?
So moved. Second.
And this is out of Dan's control and anybody else's. So Daryl, aye.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Matt Vitale, aye.
Do we have a motion to grant a variance to 10.1A?
So moved.
Seconded.
And I'll note that the tight spacing, the advantage of a few extra feet was given to the neighbors well, which we always prefer to see. Okay, Daryl, aye.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Matt Vitale, aye.
And we have a motion to grant a variance to 10.2.
So moved.
Second.
Daryl, aye.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Matt Vitale, aye.
And for the local upgrade waiver, do we have a motion to grant a variance to 15.4051H?
So moved.
Seconded.
And this was addressed earlier, concept at least. Daryl, aye.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Matt Vitale, aye.
Okay, so we can close the hearing, and are the plans ready for approval, Mark?
Mark, if you're talking, you're muted.
Yes, I apologize. When I went to hit it through the screen to another area, I apologize. The plans are ready for approval. Note, the well testing was noted, and what we did receive met everything but sodium. So, and that was received on August 17th. So we have a public well report on file for anyone that would like to see it, but it was a good report. The only thing, it did exceed the sodium level for anyone that is sensitive to sodium. Outside of that, I'd recommend approval of the plan conditional to a deed recording for the garbage disposal and the IA technology, which is the Elgin drains.
Okay, so do we have a motion to approve the plan with those two deed recordings being received?
Was there a garbage grinder? I'm sorry, I may have missed that. I had a spotting connection.
Yeah, Mark said that. There's a.
Perfect.
Yes,
Perfect.
garbage
That-
disposal and the IA technology. Yes, that's
Perfect.
correct. Yeah.
Second,
Okay, Daryl, I.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Matt Vitale, aye.
Okay, so we have 7 minutes. What,
I
Thank you.
suspect that just in terms of stuff that has public interest, given the number of folks on the phone, I don't know if we want to briefly talk about pond water quality issues.
yes, I'll let Mark address that.
Okay, thank you, Daryl. I received notice yesterday that we exceeded but Farm Pond was tested on its weekly basis, and the E. coli, which we test for, exceeded the amount of E. coli allowed. So today, and also I did a geometric mean as required by the state for the last 5 results. And they have standards both for the geometric mean and for the routine testing. The geometric mean, and they also went out and tested it today, just so I don't forget to mention that. And so when I calculated the geometric mean today with the new test, which was over both the required daily number or the routine testing as well as the geometric mean, our office, and she was pick up swimming based on the results of the bacterial reports we received. Also, when I did my evaluation today at the beach.
Mark, sorry, I lost you in the juicy part of the middle. So are we closed right now?
What's that again?
You had a bad connection in the middle.
Can everyone hear me?
I can hear you now, but it was, I was checking if it was my connection.
No, I'm working remote, so if that happens, please just jump right in. So the geometric mean was exceeded with today's test result that was taken yesterday, and the test result from the higher one was taken Monday. I was going.
Uh-oh, it's happening again.
Yeah, we're getting every other word, Mark.
Mark, can we have you call in from a landline?
So when
Uh-oh.
I'm calling from
Oh, we're hearing it's interesting, but
unless you're fighting a robot, you don't sound right.
Yeah, I think we've lost you completely, Mark.
All right, I do know that he contacted the Farm Pond Reservation Committee. Signs were going to be posted. I haven't heard yet. Maybe when he reconnects, we will, on whether those signs are up.
Am I reconnected?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so the physical facility itself, there were lots of feathers near the shoreline, which in speaking with the gate guard, they are having trouble, and some of the people that were down there have indicated that Canadian geese are starting to drop by again. So I think that's what's causing this issue. But at this point, it has to remain closed due to the geometric mean. I was planning to report it to the Department of Public Health tomorrow, and we'll just have to keep it posted until further notice and see if the geometric mean comes down.
And Mark, what's the earliest it could reopen?
If they want to keep testing it, there's a possibility now to basically, if they get a low test, because they didn't today. Unfortunately, the test was over the limit for the routine weekly test, as well as over the geometric mean. But if they get some low tests coming in, that geometric mean may go down below the value that it may get below 120.
All right, so Mark, you're breaking up again. So I will mention, Mark is saying
going to go
it has to be below 129 count, which it, for the geometric mean. And it
At
says,
126, if you can hear me.
Oh, 126.
126, if
Oh,
you can
okay.
hear me. And I'm going to connect on my phone as well. I'm sorry
Thanks.
about this.
No worries. Thanks so much, Mark. We'll blame the internet. Perfect. So in terms of that, it sounds like, Daryl, I just want to make sure I'm understanding correctly. It's sort of, at this point, everything we're doing is incorporating state requirements for a public swimming area, and it will be
Yes.
driven by test results.
yes,
Perfect.
absolutely. And you take the last 5 test results. So we had quite low numbers earlier. I think the range of the test results went from something like 5 up to just over 1,000. So it's quite a jump over time.
Okay.
And it stayed reasonably low until very recently. And this is the time of year when the geese come back to the pond.
Fair enough. So it looks like we're at 7:50 with the 17 Wood Road variance hearing.
Yes, so, and this is for a septic replacement, and we have received all the green cards. And so Dan, if you'd like to take it away again.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, this is 17 Wood Road. The house is for sale and it failed a Title V inspection report. So we retained to design a new one. The constraints are not as bad as the previous one we discussed. So we are proposing a conventional stone and pipe system here. We are asking for a couple of waivers just to help it fit into the lot better and because of some plumbing issues that can't be corrected in the house. So we have the tank is deeper than we generally like it. But the soils were good. It perked well. The front yard is where the existing system is now. We're going to be putting it back in essentially the same place, although the existing system is our leach pits. We're proposing leach trenches. The plumbing comes out of the house very deep, and there was no way to raise it up because it's underneath the slab. So that ends up putting the tank and the pump tank relatively deep, greater than 3 feet deep. So we're asking for a waiver on that. And we're also asking for a waiver on the 5-foot groundwater offset that Sherborn requires. And we're going to go with the Title V 4-foot groundwater offset just to keep the yard, grading within the property line and keep the mounding to a minimum. We meet all the well offsets for the lot and all the abutters wells. So it's really just the groundwater constraint and the cover over the tanks that we're asking for some relief on.
So I'm curious, since the cover over the tanks doesn't really come up much, is the reason for that strictly ease of access for cleaning out the tanks, or getting closer to groundwater, or some other reason?
I think those are the two big ones. It's ease of access. We don't want to have those risers too deep down. So to make maintenance of the tanks a little bit easier. Also, if you bury the tanks too deep, they're really not designed for that much earth cover. So as part of the requirements for asking for this waiver, we have to specify a heavy duty tank. And then generally we're into the groundwater table when we bury tanks too deep, and we try to avoid that as well.
Mm-hmm.
That would be my response too.
Okay. And in this case, the groundwater isn't an issue, and the weight of the soil above is addressed by the more resilient tank, I guess.
Right. The groundwater does get up to the piping connections of the tank.
Oh, it does. Okay.
So we are asking for that waiver, but we're specifying watertight connections at all the pipe connections of the tank.
Okay. I think that's the only questions I have. Matt or any abutters?
I think you addressed everything for me.
Nothing new for me.
Any abutters or anybody else who has a question they'd like to ask? And Mark, any particular observations that haven't been captured yet?
No, I think Dan reviewed it to the point where it's at, and I'm working on my phone right now. I believe my connection's okay. I may switch back and have my phone as a standby, but I think everything's been explained as it relates to this property.
You sound like $1 million, Mark.
Yes, sounds good. All right, so we'll go to the variances. All right. So do we have a motion to grant a variance to 8.01?
So moved.
Seconded.
Daryl, I.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Oh, Matt Vitale, aye.
And do we have a motion to grant a variance to 8.02?
So moved.
Seconded.
Daryl, I.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Matt Vitale, aye.
And for the local upgrade waivers, do we have a motion to grant a variance to 15.4051B?
So moved.
Seconded.
Daryl, I.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Matt Vitale, aye.
And do we have a motion to grant a variance to 15.4051J?
So moved.
Seconded.
And I'll note that there, the special rubber boots have been specified in the design. So Daryl, I.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Matt Vitale, aye.
Okay, so we'll close the hearing, and Mark, are the plans
Yes.
ready for?
The plans are ready for approval, conditional to a deed recording on the garbage disposal.
All right, so do we have a motion to approve the plans subject to receipt of that deed recording?
So moved.
Seconded.
Daryl, I.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Matt Vitale, aye.
Okay, great. Well, thank
Thank
you.
you very much.
You have a good evening.
You too. Thank you.
Have a good night, Dan.
Okay.
I think I saw Mr. Berkowitz here. Is he still on or did he jump off?
I saw him a moment ago and then something
perfect.
flashed.
Yep, he's still here.
Perfect. So why don't we go and do 13 Corsebrook? Just, I don't see anybody else here for a specific book of business.
Okay, and if the board so wishes, I can present.
Yes, that would be great.
Okay, so we
Do
do
you want me to
have
pull
a
up the plan, Mark?
what's that again?
Do you want me to pull up the plan?
Yeah, if you could, that would be easier to look at it that way. And just so the board knows, the revisions are shown on the plan, and we'll have it up in a minute, I guess. And I'm looking at both my computer and talking on my phone, so hopefully you still have my connection. Okay, and as you can see on the plan where the soil absorption system is, to the right of it are the notes about the fence. The fence is going to be in, I've talked to a person who handles horses, and the standard fence is very close to what's being presented here, which is when you use an electric fence, you use post, and you'll see around the system, there's a line and a little circle, That's where the fence is going. And it's going to be an electric fence with post, and that is a common procedure for keeping animals in or out. So that's the first item the board wanted to be sure of, that the animals, the horses, whatever animals couldn't get over the soil absorption system. And secondly, just so there would be no guessing on the distance to the lot line, because there was questions on it. The engineer has designed it to be 25 feet as the board requested off the property line. You can see that to the left of the soil absorption system at its closest point. With that said, I would recommend approval of the plan as presented.
Mark, I just want to double check, and the eye doctor said I don't need bifocals, but my current experience, is it 20 feet on the plan or 25? I'm
It's
not
20.
confident.
It is 25, and I'm glad you made that point because I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say interrupt, but it brought to my thought process, has the board approved this with the condition that it have those two items? Because it did have an approval it needed a deed recording and IA technology, and I was in the office today and forgot to look if it was already approved, conditional to these two items. I think it may have been, because I think the board gave me the opportunity, if these items were on there, to approve it if it was a distance from one of our meetings.
That's a good question. Unfortunately, we don't have Ellen to provide that answer.
I know. I would recommend that if it hasn't been approved, I recommend it be approved with the deed recording for the garbage disposal and IA technology as presented on this revised plan. If it has been approved, I'm recommending to the board that the two items that were requested have now been placed on the plan.
Mr. Berkowitz, do you recall?
I believe it was approved with administrative pending tonight's presentation of the fence line and the 25 feet being identified on the plan, as I recall.
Perfect.
I'm wondering though, if we have, even if we re-specified the deed recordings, but they're already in, then that would be sort of a moot point. Those two hurdles would have been passed, right?
Yeah, I think we approved it, but I think there's no harm in approving it again.
Yeah.
So that there's no more hiccups.
Yeah, and I'm not for sure if the deed recordings have been completed. They may have, and Nathan may know that as well.
And we'll know that very soon. But we can't know it tonight, probably.
Yep, I can check tomorrow morning.
Searching of the registry of deeds online, which I'm not going to do during the meeting.
Yeah,
So
no, and Jane can pull the plan tomorrow to let me know if the deed recordings were complete. If they have been completed.
I don't believe any of that's been recorded yet.
Okay, then that's okay.
So then,
thank you for that help.
all right. So then, okay. So now the other two requirements are met. So we're back to approval of the plan subject to the two deed recordings. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
So do we have a motion to approve the plan subject to receipt of the two specified deed recordings?
So moves.
Second.
And Mark, I just wanted to ask you one question. So it doesn't look like this is a mounded system. If I recall, this was sort of in line with the terrain. So we don't have to worry about how close the fence is to the system in terms of eroding any sloped sides that.
That's correct. In fact, the fence will be on the inside of the 40 milliliter PVC liners. So the post will be, the area will also be protected by that barrier on the downhill slope side. And it is it's raised a little bit, but not much. In the back lot side of it, there is a little raising of it on the SAS, but there's a barrier after that as well.
Okay. All right. So then Daryl, aye.
Matt Beavers, aye.
Matt Vitale, aye.
Okay, great.
Perfect. Mr. Berkowitz, anything else you need from us tonight?
I just wanted, from Veronica and I and our family, just want to thank you guys because we want to get on with this project. So thank you so much for this and everything else you do in town.
Sounds great. Have a good night now.
You're very welcome. Okay.
And do we have anybody else here who's here for a specific agenda item? Just, we're going to be here for all of them, but if anybody's here for a specific one, we're happy to address that early.
I'm here for the beaver permit.
Perfect. I have never seen a denied beaver permit, so I'm so excited to learn about something new today.
And Mark, I don't know if there's anyone here who had applied for the permit who wanted to speak. And Mark, I know that you reviewed the situation and you reached out to the people who did submit it. So if you want to give an overview on that, that would be great. And ordinarily, I would recuse myself from this discussion because I am in a abutter to the, diagonally across the street from where this was taking place. However, the rule of necessity says that I need to participate because otherwise we won't have a quorum if there is any kind of decision that might need to be made on this.
Yes, and you can see in my, not the best penmanship, but the reason I could not approve for any work to be done at this time was based on the fact that the water was flowing through the culvert that goes under the road. It's a very large culvert. I'd say it's 4 to 6 feet in diameter. And it was flowing at a very good rate and only probably at the very bottom. So I'd say 15 to 25% of the actual culvert was, the pipe was being utilized. So, and the water was flowing at a great rate. Not to say that this could be a project, maybe if there are beaver issues in the area, to consider trapping beavers during the season. There is a season where you can trap beavers without getting permission through the Board of Health based on an emergency. We can only issue permits based on emergencies. So unfortunately, that's why I had to deny it. I didn't see any road flooding. The culvert was functioning. The water level was well below the road base. So not to say if they want to trap beavers during the allowed season that they couldn't be able to. They could do that without permits. But at this point, I did not see an emergency. And I will be available at any time if for some reason it changes.
Okay, and you did relay the information to
Yes, I did relay
whomever was
this
involved.
information to the DPW director, who was the one requesting this.
Okay. And I recall that years ago, there was Beaver Dam at the same, roughly the same spot. And I believe they were trapped at that time. So I guess I'd also, if there are issues that come up again, maybe we could talk about putting in one of the beaver deceiver sort of devices might save the town some money. Since it sounds like it's something that the town ends up taking care of.
That would be
Because
an
it's
excellent
the brook
idea.
as opposed to a private individual. So might save some money in the long run and allow those beavers to do their beavery thing.
Yeah, I would suggest that highly, Daryl, that they, we do hire an expert from Beaver Solutions, and I've worked with him in the past, and he does recommend those water lowering control devices, because no matter what, if you have a good source of food and all you need really is good timber as well as the water, beavers will come back even if they're removed. So the best bet is to use the water lowering control devices and have a maintenance agreement where they come out and check it at least once a year.
So, and if anybody, I don't know if folks have seen it, and there's actually a wonderful PBS special about beaver management at some, I believe, nature preserve of some sort up in Canada, and how much effort they went to and how difficult it was to keep removing the dams and how fast the beavers could rebuild them. And then they put in one of these flow leveling devices, and it essentially allows the beavers to build their dam, but the water doesn't build up too high because you're penetrating the dam and allowing the water to flow through, but being discharged far enough away from the dam that the sound of the running water doesn't bother them, because that's what compels them to build their dams. So they've built their dam, they can live in their lodge, but the water doesn't get high. And you can set where you want the water level to be. So that's how those work. And they're
It
not.
seems like this would be a great opportunity for that. I wonder what it would take to make that happen.
Yeah, I mean, I have experience setting one of these up for a client, and it worked really well. It was smooth and easy to do. It was a lot easier than dealing with removing dams and trapping beavers, and far less expensive. I mean, the cost was less expensive than one trapping, and there's a tiny bit of maintenance that needs to be done on them. So anyway, and they're gaining some ground and lots more installations around, so more experience with nuances of their workings. But okay. So any other questions about that? Okay, on to another. There's one other topic here on the agenda that I think we should skip because we only have 3 of us here today, and that would be the reorganization of the board. Seems like perhaps next meeting when we have everyone back again might be appropriate. Is that all right with folks, or would we like?
I think it makes sense to put on the September 1st meeting.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll do that. Oh, is anyone here for 6 Ash Lane, Mark?
I don't believe so, Daryl. What happened, 6 Ash Lane, the new owners wanted to get a copy of, they've owned it for a year, so a copy of their Title V report. And we found a Title V report that indicated a design flow on a what we sometimes call non-conventional system. So I called the Title V inspector. He has since corrected it. He said it was a mistake on their part. He said, we send out our field people and they sometimes do 3 jobs a day. And that field person, when they went to put the report together, and incorrectly put data from another property onto this property. So the next step now obviously is to let the homeowner know, a new file exists. And then whatever happens between the new owner and the Title V inspection company is a civil matter.
Okay, so is there nothing further that we need to do?
No, I have to say the Title V inspection company was very professional about solving it. They didn't in any way try to say it wasn't their fault or anything like that. They admitted that it was improperly filed and corrected it. And yesterday they submitted the new report showing there's no design flow for that septic system, and indicated too that it's not a conventional system. But they didn't put the address on it. So I called them today and they have since sent it in. And I believe, I haven't looked at the email, but I believe it has the address on it now. But it's just a report to the board that we had something that doesn't happen too often.
Okay, thank you. As long as you're at it, would you like to address 124 Bogastow Brook? The status update, and perhaps Matt, I don't know.
Sure. And I did update Matt as well that at this point in this time of year, the client feels the agricultural needs for a second well are not as, I guess, is not the word important, but not at this point needed until maybe next year. So he has rescinded his request at this point and may come back next year to discuss that possibility.
And Daryl, if we can just take a second, because this was the first case that we had with kind of the new regulation where the applicant sort of proceeded to sort of submit it. So I just wanted to briefly comment on what I communicated to make sure it sort of sounds right to the rest of the board, although I think we should have this as an agenda item on the September 1st meeting as well. I sort of went through the bylaw and, kind of made some general advice in terms of the positioning of the well and if their future intent is to potentially have it be a primary water source for the house, which they'd alluded to in the meeting, to make sure that that satisfied the kind of residential use and not just the irrigation well setbacks. The other thing that I talked to him about was that the bylaw requires a sort of demonstration that a neighboring or abutting well would not be adversely impacted by the approval of a second well on a property. And so didn't specify a specific strategy, but I think said, in general, we would need to know what's the flow that's expected, what's the sort of pattern of use that's expected. I don't think we can say that just satisfying the setbacks in and of itself demonstrates that no adverse effect would be had, since if it would, there'd be no reason to have that language in the regulation since the setbacks already exist. And then I think that's part of the question we need to answer when we're considering any of these secondary wells is, how much water do we expect them to be pulling for the pattern of use that's proposed? I did talk to him a little bit about the strategies that have been used. The project I remembered on was I think the 54 North Main 40B with the drawdown testing and the sort of like, I think it was a laser sensor that could be used for drawdown testing. Told him I didn't have a good sense of what the cost of that was. I think that would certainly be another alternative to prognosticating the volume, but that I just didn't know if it was kind of a scale that would be readily absorbable in the context of a, you know, $10,000 to $20,000 well drilling as opposed to a multi-million-dollar residential project. But at the very least, that I thought we'd want to be able to specify expected flow as part of what the applicant would include in initial materials. Does that sound generally right? As I suspect we'll continue to have these questions come up. Is there, you know, I was sort of trying to put together an initial flow sheet of this is how we can sort of think about it. And I'm happy to try to get something like that a little bit more together to share with the board next time. But does that sound on the right track?
Yes, it definitely does. And I agree that since we're at the beginning of this relatively new regulation, providing some kind of guidance as we've developed over the years in the past, not we, but the Board of Health has developed for other things that just help set expectations. And also, undeniably, there's going to be some learning along the way for all of us as to how to do this. Regulation or regulatory development is not simple. I mean, to compare it to what happens at the state level, for example, large groups are convened and it takes years sometimes to develop something, and we're trying to be more efficient with the scant workforce on that. And just to note, the monitoring devices you referred to for the monitoring the neighboring wells in terms of impacts on groundwater, I believe at the time, and this may have changed, and I also got this pricing from a hydrogeologist that the town has hired for peer review of a number of projects in town. And so he had quoted, it's about $100 a week for the monitors, for one monitor. But that's not the latest cost. That's a cost number from, I think, about 3 or so years ago.
But so it has the right number of zeros, at least we suspect.
Yes, I hope so. Or maybe at least one too many zero rather than too few.
So I'm happy to try to pull together just a little bit of a flow sheet for us to validate at the next meeting based on this recent experience, just so we can make sure that kind of we've given Mark some tools in terms of clear guidance from the board that he can share with applicants to say, you know, this is what the scoop is. Because I think that, I know for the engineer for this project or the well driller, they just kind of said it satisfies setbacks, thus it's, you know, totally fine. And I don't think that meets a requirement.
Okay, and then another matter, I don't know if you want to discuss the application fee. Is that still an issue?
I don't know. I think we can follow it up after Ellen's back. I don't know that that we sort of talked to the applicant about it.
Okay.
And I also don't know, like, Mark, if he ends up deciding that they want to resubmit next year. Anyway, let's just talk about when Ellen's back at the next meeting, because I don't know that we have the applicant's opinion on it.
All right. Okay, let's see. So reorganization board is off. Mosquito spraying. I wanted to bring this up more to say that I think we should talk about this further from the perspective of planning for next year, which might have to do with certain opportunities to opt out of aerial spraying, that it has to be an opt-out as opposed to an opt-in. And I'm not sure if it's unconditionally granted or not, and the request has to come from the select board of a town, is the way it's currently specified. So that would be, I think, a longer term discussion that we should spend more time on. I'll just mention that there was a discussion at the select board last Thursday about no spray signs that went up on conservation land, and that the stewards of that conservation land and those with responsibility for it, it's the Conservation Commission, And so they made that decision to opt out for a whole host of reasons that they've discussed apparently at many meetings over the years, because it is a recurring issue for them to examine. And then there were questions just about the placement of the sign. So I just wanted to relay that to the board, and you can ask me questions about it, or we can talk about it in more detail at another meeting in the future, but no action required from us on this at the moment.
I would love to revisit this either. I mean, I don't know how juicy the September 1st agenda is, but on one of the September agendas to just kind of go through it. And then, sorry, Melinda, I didn't see your hand up.
Okay.
Okay, I just popped it up. Thank you for a quick recognition. How do we know when they're going to spray? I mean, I remember last summer, like all of a sudden I heard the noise and I'm frantically closing my windows and, you know, trying to get the cat in and all the rest of it. Is there some way we can at least know?
So I was checking the website, and Sherborn is slated for Thursdays at the moment. And then they're supposed to also post whether they're actually going to spray. And I have to say, I did not have enough time to dig down to find that, or there just haven't been any. I just couldn't tell. So I haven't finished digging through that, and I could send you a link if you're interested in also looking, because I would like to know as well. And
Yeah.
that would be, that's for any, well, yeah, any kind of spraying. And they base it on what kind of results they get from mosquito and other animal testing. And it's called the arbovirus report. Is that the correct term? Or is there another R in there? But
No, that is correct.
No, you got it.
Yeah.
All right.
I think, Daryl, I don't know if, you know, this is a baby of the Board of Health or not, but while we're batting this stuff around, I mean, does the state at least let towns know other than keep checking their website? I mean, I would think they would have some way to communicate so that cities and towns could then communicate to the residents, like reverse 911 or something.
Unfortunately, Ellen would be the absolute best person to answer that, and she is on vacation, so a much deserved vacation, I might add. So
yeah, I would second the much deserved vacation. I think we get the notification of the cases, but I don't think the spraying. But I mean, like the positive hits, but I don't know if that's because Ellen's manually gathering it or because it gets pushed to her as a Sherborn point person.
Yeah, the sense I have is that we're getting case report data, but which seems to be compiled centrally. But I agree. I've only ever seen the spraying on the website, but we can certainly talk to Ellen and circle back with you if we learn anything.
Right. And what I do know is for the ground spraying right now, it is, unless there is compelling information from those test results and the surveillance that they do for Tripoli, West Nile, and other diseases, is that it's by request of homeowners, and then they will go out and they are supposed to only spray the homeowner's land. So the purpose of the signs is just to make sure that, I mean, I don't know how accurate any of the GPS systems or maps or whatever else they're using. So I think that's what then the posting of the signs is, to make sure there's not overflow. And then it could also be if they're doing just a broad spraying, again, because of some results. And so there are a few fine points. Ellen probably knows them, and it would be nice to find out. And so people know if there's going to be any kind of spraying, do you want to put up a sign or not? If it's neighbor driven or wide area driven.
And Daryl, if I can add, I worked with Central Mass Mosquito Control Program for about 38 years. They will, for the other town I used to work in, and they will come out and actually do a presentation at a Board of Health meeting if you so wish, or they could do it virtually as well. But in most cases, ground spraying can be requested. You can opt out of ground spraying for the routine. Where it gets complicated is aerial or ground spraying that's required by the state, because we're at a different point in almost an emergency situation. But I still believe you can opt out even if that's the case, if it's not aerial. If it's ground spraying, they do use GPS units on their sprayers. So when they go by a home, they'll see the sign, but they also have it GPS coordinated so the sprayer shuts off. But Timothy Deschamps is the director of that program, and he's come out to discuss the program at least twice for the other town I worked for recently too. So I think it's important maybe that be considered so residents can be educated on the program and how it works. And I know, like I said, some parts of it, but he's the best to have discuss it.
Okay, and I'll just note, my husband contacted them to ask for some of the details on how they know where the property boundaries are. And apparently not every vehicle that goes out has the GPS system. So there are some supplementary systems too that they're using.
Yeah, the signage
that may or
helps
may
too.
not be as
Yep.
precise. So.
Yep.
Okay. So we
just
will
wanna say, I
discuss this
think-
again. Yeah.
No,
Sorry.
I think the only other thing I would add, I thought on the select board meeting, Courtney did a really nice job articulating for a suburban to semi-rural area like ours, the limitations on the truck-based spraying in terms of just how far the cloud of adulticide will actually carry is pretty limited and probably most effective in communities with a more grid-like pattern. But I think good discussion. I look forward to more of it.
And I think also urban areas aren't supporting the diversity of wildlife that might be here and be affected by the spray. I think mosquitoes, and then various other vermin, but maybe not the same butterfly or bee or dragonfly populations as we'd find here. So another difference in the city. Okay, so signage for Farm Pond. And we have folks here who've been helping. There's been a group effort to have a posting regarding the harmful algae or cyanobacteria blooms that have been cropping up in Farm Pond. So, sorry, I'm not organized at all for this.
Well, Darryl, I was out there today and the signage is up. So for the
there's some the signage that's up is old as far as I know, unless the new signage just went up in the last day. So we had some updates to that. And I'm trying to see if I have it readily available where maybe I could share. Or Melinda or Tom, have you made any edits and you have a later version? Or shall I search for?
No, I just have the last one that you circulated. I thought we just had an FPAC meeting last night, and I thought Jeannie had said that she had posted the latest version.
Oh, really? Oh.
That it was, yeah. I didn't. I wasn't down there today because we closed the reservation, so I didn't get my swim in. But yeah, that's what she said last night. Does that make sense?
Okay. All right, I
Darryl,
have
the
been
one
out
that-
of town since yesterday evening.
The signs that are posted there, I took some pictures today. They upper part of it's yellow and it just one word, caution.
Yeah.
I don't know those are the old ones, if they're the old ones or the new ones, but they did have one at the boat ramp and one at the front entrance.
Okay. All right, then pending finding out if that's been posted and then that's taken care of. Sorry, I have to get my head on, but so one of the things in the change of the signage is I wanted to have sort of a two-step process with signage from Board of Health perspective of how do we alert people to the hazards. And I have to say the Farm Pond Advisory Committee has been doing an amazing job and Tom Trainer has really gone above and beyond in terms of training the Sherborn Yacht Club staff on using a microscope to evaluate what's in the water so they can determine whether it's an organism of concern. And the lifeguard staff is attuned to this as well. People are certainly noticing it and relaying information to various people when it does come up or calling it in. So one thing that it's difficult, it's very time consuming to do it. There's a lag sometimes between when it appears and when it can be sampled and analyzed and confirmed as to technically what the status is. Also, it may be occurring without people noticing it right away. So with the bacteria that we just discussed earlier tonight, we're able to have test results and then take an action based on that. This one is is more complicated than the coliform testing of the water. So I want to have something that would tell people that this condition has been occurring. It can change rapidly. And here's a place that you can go and you can inform yourself about what risks you might be taking, what kind of things to watch out for that would tell you that you might have been exposed, be aware of any sensitivities you have, and put some of the responsibility in the hands of people rather than us every time there's a sign of any kind of green tint to the water, just shutting down the pond, which a lot of people would probably find very upsetting, myself included perhaps in that group, and have them understand too that we're doing our best to track it, but there will be delays between what it is and us evaluating it and understanding it better. And then if we do find something that confirms what the conditions are that requires a posting, then we can also add that posting. So I believe there's a note on hopefully the sign that's gone up that says, be aware that there may be other postings you should be reading about this. So that's the general gist. And we can always change it. These signs are not cast in bronze. So we can make improvements as we get feedback or go along or think of something different. But I was really concerned about the just blanket closing down for extended periods of time versus putting some responsibility into the hands of visitors to the pond and encouraging them to inform themselves about the issues. So, anything else you want to add, Melinda or Tom or anybody else?
Actually, this is Tom Darrell. That was a very good summary. Very challenging field. We have been seeing very low levels by the microscope of one of the potentially harmful cyanobacteria, but nothing like we saw last summer. So that's good.
Yeah, I would say that the condition of the water, the odors, the color is far more normal this year than last year. Some things I can still detect some of that cloudiness here and there, but the color has been much better the last few weeks compared to maybe June was not so good. And what else? And then, yeah. So, all right. Does anyone else have any questions about that? And certainly if you think of anything that you'd like to add, or you read the sign and you have an idea or whatever, just reach out and let us know. Okay. Do we have any further COVID-19 updates other than what we discussed earlier? Matt or Matt?
I think nothing specific.
Okay.
Yeah,
I think.
Oh, go ahead, Daryl.
No, go right ahead. I know you compiled data, so maybe that's.
I think just kind of for general awareness, there will be a couple of discussions that will be happening through the auspices of the school. So there's a joint school committee meeting tomorrow night where I think they'll be reviewing the overall kind of plans for the year, as well as a series of parent meetings and faculty and staff meetings, I think, although I'm not totally sure on that, but that was my understanding that those will be happening next week as well. So there'll just be some additional discussion and communication, and I think answering of questions. You know, in terms of the kind of COVID numbers we're seeing right now, you know, we had the data pushed last week. I think overall we're seeing significant increases in different parts of the country behaving kind of very differently. I think we've been pretty fortunate in the Northeast so far. That's probably driven by pretty robust vaccine uptake. But if you sort of look across the country, you know, Massachusetts is about half the case rate of the US, which is itself about a third of the case rate of the kind of very high incidence communities right now. So, you know, we're definitely seeing an uptick. In the Boston area, we're seeing an uptick in COVID volume, although it's still much lower than it was in any of our previous surges, at least within the MGB system so far. And I think in general, you know, kind of don't want to jinx anything, but while we're seeing increases, I think it looks like we're still receiving significant benefit from vaccination. You know, I think the other piece that has come out in the last week is, you know, the boosters for folks who are immune compromised with a kind of specific subset of patients identified have been approved. And then I think today came out with recommendations that there will likely, or that there will be recommendations for a third dose booster for Pfizer, Moderna, likely coming out later this fall with a goal of being 8 months after the initial doses. So for, you know, those of us who are sort of COVID frontline, will probably be a little bit after our 8-month mark. For folks in the general community, they should be able to have access for third dose booster. A lot of that is based on data coming out of Israel, which had very rapid, very broad adoption with Pfizer, which has seen some kind of declination over time in effectiveness. Some of this looks to be driven by specific age groups where older adults are at higher risk of loss of efficacy sooner. And again, we still see significant protection against severe disease, including hospitalization or death. I think that in general, the access to community vaccine sites is robust enough that there's no specific need to, you know, kind of revisit policies there. I don't know if there will be any additional considerations when we have pediatric vaccines in terms of whether we'll have big cycles of lots of people seeking vaccination simultaneously, those slow things down again. But right now, it sounds like access is pretty good. I think that's all I got. Matt, anything else you would add?
I was just gonna second the comment on it. It seems like from what I'm hearing that access will be able to support boosters pretty well. So I don't anticipate there being sort of much additional logistics to be done there. And so hopefully we're in good shape. I think just because we've had such good uptake in Massachusetts, we have the reserve to be able to do that. I also just realized I hit 8 months today. So hopefully we hear more on that soon.
And then Daryl, I know we sort of added the late breaking ZBA hearings for the Dunkin' Donut hearing. I don't know what, do we want to transition to that if there's not more COVID?
Yeah, if you can, sorry, bring that up since I haven't had the pleasure of reading that email yet.
I actually didn't get that email.
Let me see if I can find it.
I know that there is an application coming. I don't know if that's the only matter on the next CBA hearing. So that would be one question, because then we could just talk about it more in the abstract. But if there are others that so ordinarily we provide some feedback to them, and I don't know when their meeting is.
Oh, I'm now reading, it looks like we can defer to September 1st, rereading Ellen's email. So let's defer to September 1st.
Yes, and Okay, so that sounds like it's the email maybe that came a few days ago. All right, I thought there's something new I missed today.
No, this is from 2 o'clock.
Oh, it
but
is.
I think we can
Okay.
push it to the, yep, I think we can push it to the first, so let's just go ahead and do that.
Yeah, there's something that's taking place, I think, on the 7th for that. And it's plans to take down the building, rebuild in the spot.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's going to be certainly a septic capacity issue is my guess.
That's correct, Darren. I just forwarded to you in case you didn't get it. And Ellen did say, I didn't see that part, Matt, but Ellen did say it can wait for September 1st.
Okay. All right. Right, because there was quite a packet of information to go through for that. And the other issue, there was agenda items for the next time. So we've named a few. Another thing I'd like to consider is whether we need to do any outreach to child care centers. So not the schools, but the preschool sort of thing in Sherborn for updated COVID-19 support. I don't know if anyone has thoughts.
I think my sort of general thoughts there are, I have not reviewed the early childhood guidance and whether that's been updated. And so I don't think there's any updated guidance there, but let me try it and see if I can track anything down.
Okay.
And I'll try to address that before the next meeting.
And I know Ellen had communication. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say Ellen had communications with them in the past, and so she may have her finger on the pulse of that as well.
Sounds good. We can follow up with her when she's back.
Okay.
My understanding is that, sorry, my understanding is that the early education guidance has been there's been very little specific this year. Individual centers have been choosing to be a little more stringent and more similar to where we were last year. But I think the EES guidance has not put a lot of mandated much in the way of modifications, but probably worth looking at to be certain.
Okay. All right. So we can revisit that. And the other thing I'd like to keep in the back of our minds is that the ARPA funding that was provided to municipalities specifically notes that it's for public health initiatives. So we might want to think about what that might mean and how that could be used for anything we might need to do. Doesn't have to be COVID specific.
Can we get a toiletry and golden retriever for the Farm Pond Beach? Keep the geese off.
I don't see why not. I have to say I was a little creeped out by the very lifelike coyote fox that's on the Sherborn Yacht Club dock because it was quite good, except that it was immobile. But aside from that, it was convincing to me.
Can I volunteer my retriever?
Yes, would you please?
Yeah.
only if toilet trained. Otherwise, you
She's
just
great. She's really good.
Another.
That's what we need.
So there were
so for the
parts in the pond I could smell the goose. Is it guano for them, or that's only bats? I don't know. I was surprised. I had not detected that before.
I think it's best described by words one ought not record. So for next week, it sounds like for the agenda, we've got the discussion of the secondary well and proposed workflow, which I can be responsible for. I think we should have just an update in terms of any other late-breaking MIAA updates. I think we can assume that we'll get some guidance before then, but I would have assumed we'd get it before now. I don't expect us to need to vote on that, but it may be worth just briefly reviewing so people are aware. I don't think it needs to be a joint meeting. Matt, I can't think of any other COVID stuff. Does anything come to mind for you?
I don't think so. I think not for September 1.
Yeah, and then we'll have the reorg of the board, and we'll have
variance hearings, most likely. And there's some other issues of applications that are going, a second well issue probably that we'll be discussing.
Okay. Even better reason to have a flow sheet kind of worked out.
Okay, and
That
so
sounds
our
great.
I think our last item is minutes.
So I think we
Sorry,
had the
my
May 5th
share
minutes.
stuff.
I looked at the May 5th minutes and didn't have any substantive updates.
Same here.
Okay, so then same here as well. So do we have a motion to approve the minutes as tweaked?
So moved.
So moved. Second,
Daryl, I.
Matt Beaver's aye.
Matt Vitae, aye.
Excellent. All right, ready for adjourning?
Indeed.